So
Good afternoon.
the first item we've got is to appoint a chair for this meeting. So we've got nominations for chair. Just if we're looking for a nomination.
Yeah. Simon, could I propose Councillor Hawthorne, please?
Yes. Is that seconded?
I'll second that.
Yeah. We've got that. Yeah. Philip seconding that. Any other nominations? We haven't got any other nominations. So your chair, Mark?
Thank you. And just to clarify, I think I'm chair for this meeting only because we can't actually make a formal decision on chair of the meeting until we meet in person. So just to clarify for everyone on the call on that basis. But good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Constitution Committee, the first one of this new cycle. Can I first ask for apologies for absence? So I think the answer to that is none. Sophie?
Yeah, we've got no apologies. All members are in attendance today.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'm going to go to item number 3, which is the Fire and Rescue Scrutiny Committee terms of reference, which are circulated on pages 1 and 2, and ask Rob to very briefly talk to this one. Rob.
I think the paper is self-explanatory. The Council at its annual general meeting agreed to the creation of the Fire and Rescue Scrutiny Committee. So I was asked to draft some terms of reference which are attached within your packs, and these reflect the style and the level of detail that sits within the Council's constitution. I'm presenting them to you for their agreement.
Fantastic, Rob. Now, we're very fortuitous due to the nomination process of our respective groups that not only the chair of the scrutiny committee is here, but also the person who will be scrutinising is here as well. So we 2 experts in the field. So the paper's been circulated now. Anyone got any questions or comments on this one? I will take Jeremy first and then John.
Yeah, it looks all okay. I was just wondering what's going to happen to trading standards, registration and coroner's service, which is currently managed by the Chief Fire Officer. Does that one come under the remit of this committee or not?
Rob?
The intention, Jeremy, is that those are scrutinised by the Communities and Adults Committee. Those fall within the scope of that committee.
Okay, that's fine.
John?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, there have been some previous discussions in relation to the terms of reference for this committee, and I just wondered, because this was a proposal from the majority group, whether there is an opportunity at some point to review these terms of reference, compare and contrast them to similar terms of reference that may exist for other such scrutiny committees that exist in other authorities. In other words, I don't know whether these terms of reference we're presented with come from a source or some recommendation or some other good practice, or are they simply an idea that's come from the majority group, or what's their sort of genesis, and what opportunity is there to review and finesse them as we go forward?
I think from memory, I mean, I'm not wishing to take credit for everything. I don't think it's the majority administration's viewpoint. I think this originally originated from a piece of work scrutiny did last year, but was never implemented. Is that correct? The terms of reference specifically, I think, are being just drafted by officers.
If I can come in, Mark, if you're happy. You're quite right that there was a cabinet panel that sat and there were discussions around the future scrutiny of the Fire and Rescue Service. And as the cabinet member then and still the cabinet member now, I pushed very directly for this to happen on the back of the fact that Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services struggled to understand, particularly in County Council Fire and Rescue Services, the way in which the fire service is scrutinised. The fire service has been in bed with a number of other scrutiny committees and has never really had the positioning that it would warrant and require. So I took the opportunity through the LGA and the County Council, 11 other fire and rescue services up and down the country, to look at what they were doing. It turns out that only one was at the same stage as us. And I've done some work in the background with that fire and rescue service. And that's where we've arrived at the process that fire should have its own scrutiny. And the point taken about, is it right at some stage to review? I would say, but looking to Rob, any review can happen at any scrutiny committee at any time during the cycle to ensure that what is being scrutinised is serving the purpose.
Does that cover that off for you, John? Thank you. And Paul, sorry, I missed your hand.
No, that's all right. Yeah, thank you. It was really just to add to what John has said, I think, is that it would be nice to have a formal review of this new committee at some stage. So I take the point that Dave Norman said that reviews can be ongoing. That's fine. Yeah, absolutely fine. But I think it'd be good to have a formal review as well, because it is a new committee. And, you know, a suggestion would be a year, just to see how it beds in after a year. Also, I just wanted to add to that at the end of the last council, for those of us who were in that council, there was the review of scrutiny being taken, which was being undertaken. Some of the findings were presented to the final council meeting in the last cycle, so in March, which we saw. But what's happening with that as a wider, what's happening with the results of that, is that, you know, and can that be tied in at some stage with a formal review of this new committee too?
Simon, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I can answer that. The intention, Paul, is to take the report to a future meeting of corporate scrutiny, not the one that's coming up, but one of the two after that, so that the new members can have a look at the findings of the review from before and consider how they want to take that forward. The first round of scrutiny committees following the election are more induction ones, so intention was to take it to the committee after that.
Cool. Okay, I think we're reaching some sort of consensus on this one. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Let's review this and put down a marker of 1 year. The caveat I place on that is obviously the publication of the white paper by the government on fire governance, which may have something to say on this particular topic anyway. I think it's also worth flagging up that the County Council Network has commissioned a piece of work to be done on fire and rescue services, primarily focused on county ones plus fire authorities. And part of that work is going to look at best practice around governance. So again, there might be some recommendations that come off the back of that as well that could be fed into that one as well. So I think that's fine. Paul, I take it you're happy with the recommendation, the suggestion that the overall scrutiny review is picked up by corporate scrutiny at its not next meeting, which I think most of the first cycle meetings for scrutiny are training events more than anything else, but the one after, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Give us a time to reflect on any changes there on that one. John, is that an old hand or a new hand?
An old hand, I'll take it down.
Old hand, excellent. They've updated WebEx, certainly on my machine over the weekend, so everything's in a different place and it's all in black. So I'm struggling this meeting because it's suddenly very different from what I've been used to the last 12 months. The curious looks from other people is only happened to me. Oh, well, there you go. So are we all content on that recommendation? Yes. Okay, lots of nods. Wave at the screen if you wish to, but I don't see any dissent on that front. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4, which is the Appeals Committee Terms of Reference, which is a report circulated by Gillian. Gillian, do you want to introduce that?
Yes, certainly. So thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This paper brings forward proposed changes to the Constitution to ensure that it sets out the up-to-date procedure for managing potential disciplinary issues for the statutory officers, so purely procedural amendment. And it follows proposed changes that were suggested by the model guidance issued by the JNC. And you can see, Chair and members, in the appendix, you've got the two changes proposed to the Appeals Committee. Firstly, to allow individual appeals brought by the Chief Executive, Section 151 officer, a monitoring officer, or any of the other chief officers to whom the Council's employment-related procedures grant an express right of appeal to elected members. And secondly, it adds an additional paragraph regarding the composition of that part of the Appeals Committee, and it actually explains that membership will comprise a politically balanced subcommittee of up to 5 members, and none of whom must be a member of the investigating and disciplinary panel, and one of whom must be a member of the cabinet. So I think the report is self-explanatory. If members are minded to support the proposed changes, then we would take forward a recommendation to the next council meeting, which is towards the end of this month, Chair. That's all I was going to say on the report.
Questions, Paul?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, I just want to try and get my head around this a little bit more. Is up to now, then, if the chief executive, as an example, wanted to make an appeal, at the moment, am I right in saying from what you've said here, is that appeal would go to the Appeals Committee? Is that correct, just to start off with?
It would. So what the procedure actually said is anything short of dismissal would go to the Appeals Committee. However, if the recommendation, hypothetically, of course, we're talking here, if there was a recommendation for full dismissal, that would go to the Council for a decision. So this is purely for appeals for the Chief Executive short of dismissal.
Okay, that's clarified. The Appeals Committee then, at the moment, has got how many councillors on it, and how many would sit normally until we make this change?
At the moment, the Appeals Committee membership is actually explains up to 15 county councillors, but actually the JNC guidance explains that the Appeals Committee should comprise up to 5 members. So this is the guidance that's come out.
But the problem you've got there, though, Gillian, is that most people who've signed up to the Appeals Committee have signed up to do school transport appeals, effectively, haven't they?
Yes. So if we ended up in this situation, clearly we would run the training sessions. And I know you're absolutely right, the majority of the Appeals Committee is for the transport element, but it does cover other areas. And when it does so, then we would provide full training for members.
Okay, yes, sorry, I was to ignore the hand going up and down there. That wasn't me doing that deliberately. Okay, I get that. I suppose what I'm trying to understand is what difference would it make? Would it make any difference? The Appeals Committee at the moment of up to 15 is politically balanced, is it not? It is, isn't it? So the 5 would be a microcosm of that in effect. It would still be politically balanced. Yes. Can a cabinet member sit on the Appeals Committee at the moment?
Well, yes. Also, we've got. Yes, they can.
They can. Okay, so there's no difference in terms of the actual membership. It's just that it's smaller.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
I've got Lyndon, and then I've got Colin waving at the screen. So Colin as well.
Thank you. The question I've got is when you look at the reference to 5, a maximum of 5, what would the minimum be?
The minimum would be 3.
Okay.
So if members felt they wanted that in there, we could put a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5.
Okay, Colin.
Thank you. Just a question about if there was a situation where, I don't know, the cabinet had brought the issue, whatever it is, to one of those chief officers, is there the possibility that the chief officer could object to a cabinet member being party to an appeal? Just something in my memory from about 20 years ago that sort of springs to mind. And would that be an issue, or has all of that now been resolved during that very long period?
I suppose the issue here is you're talking about impartiality of the actual cabinet member that's sitting on the appeals committee. So I think that would be the issue. It's an employment issue, isn't it, in terms of ensuring that the cabinet member appointed to undertake that role within that particular 5-member composition will be acting impartially.
Yeah, the problem that was raised before was that you have collective responsibility. So if the cabinet had decided something, then all of the members of the cabinet are party to that decision. You then have a situation where the cabinet member is, it could be argued, cannot be impartial because of their cabinet responsibility. I mean, you know, I understand completely this is almost certainly hypothetical, but unfortunately, if it happens, you're then stuck.
Yeah, I think the procedure actually in terms of change, so there are a series of steps before we get to appeals committee. And as I say, it is limited those periods in respect to the chief executive where it's something short of dismissal. So you would have, as I said, the investigatory and disciplinary committee consider it. There is also the involvement of the independent persons and the appeals committee. So I think the key issue here is, you know, it's in all our interests to make sure that whichever cabinet member is sitting on there is acting impartially. And I think what we'd have to look at is, depending on the circumstances of the particular issue, whether there was any conflict in a particular member sitting on that appeals committee.
Do we need to appoint cabinet members to appeals committee then, or are they added in addition to?
I think it depends on the type of appeal, Simon. I know that obviously you've probably dealt with Transport Committee and other appeals, but I think the issue here is if the situation ever arose, then that's when we would pull together the 5 members and we would identify the relevant cabinet member who would be going to sit on that actual appeals committee at that point in time.
Because I mean, the reality is, no disrespect to any of the 15 members that are named in the current appeals committee, if there is one regarding the chief exec, I mean, probably at that stage the LGA is probably involved as well. You'd probably be looking for an appeal panel that's made up of senior members of the council from all groups, not necessarily the 15 people who've volunteered to be a pool of resource, because they don't all meet. To do school appeals, which is their main bread and butter. So as long as that's possible, I think the bit that was confusing me in the paper was the sort of the linkage between what you're talking about here and obviously the 15 members that already sit as part of a slightly different process.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Simon,
we already have a similar and equivalent arrangement on appointments panel when that's meeting as a subcommittee, where essentially members of the committee can be subbed onto that committee where it's relevant to the decision that's being taken. So in practice, we would do something similar here.
Yes, I was just going to say that's what we've done. That's what we've done in the past. I was going to mention appointments committee. Yeah, that's right, Rob. Yeah.
Jeremy?
Now you've mentioned the appointments committee, I just wonder why we're not handing the responsibility of dealing with disciplinary matters to the appointments committee. Because those are the people that on there are skilled at dealing with senior officers, because they're the ones that are involved in the appointments and stuff like that. I just wonder why we're not doing that, because I think at the city council, because I'm on it, but we've not done anything yet. We've got a senior appointments committee, and I think it looks at both things. I just wonder why we're not doing that. We then got people with a proper skill base to deal with issues, to deal with senior members of staff, haven't we? Rather than people that are doing school appeals, which is a totally different sort of area of work.
Yes, so the Investigatory and Disciplinary Committee is formed from the Appointments Committee. So part of the process is that for the Appointments Committee, in the circumstances regarding disciplinary matters concerning the statutory officers, they act as the Investigatory and Disciplinary Committee. So as you can see from the actual amendment to the terms of reference, what you've got the ability for the Appointments Committee, acting as the Investigatory and Disciplinary Committee, to consider the initial part of the issue, but then there is an ability for the statutory officers to appeal to the Appeals Committee. So, and as you can see from the proposed changes, the Appeals Committee is a standalone, separate part of the process from the Investigatory and Disciplinary Panel. So you have to have those changes for the matters to be reconsidered again from the perspective of the employment process.
I got it. Okay, but assume then that we've got senior members of the council on the appointments committee. They then would not be able to sit on the appeal committee.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
So we'd have to pick the right people to sit on the appeals to deal with that matter, who are totally independent of any actions that have taken place beforehand, I assume.
Yes.
Cool. Colin, then Phil.
It seems to me that having the reference to the appeals committee is, in a sense, superfluous. If we're likely to just appoint senior members who haven't taken any part in any disciplinary hearings so far, so wouldn't it be clearer just to say that an appeals committee will be drawn from, you could say, senior members or whatever of council on an ad hoc basis? Because whether they're part of the appeals committee or not, they would need training for this specifically. So, and if that's the likelihood, then perhaps it ought to be clearer. Even if we've got to, for some reason, we have to have nominations, we can just, seek nominations from people of council now, and hopefully they're never going to meet and they'll understand that. But at least then we can, I think it's clearer than making reference to the appointments to the appeals committee.
So can I get that clear? I think we do need to see some reference within the appeals committee regarding the ability to appeal to that group of 5 members. But what you're suggesting is that should make it clear that those 5 members are senior members of...
No, I don't think that's what... and I do have some sympathy with Colin. I think we've created a confusion by virtue of the fact we're trying to ride this topic onto something that serves a different purpose. So most members will understand what appeals committee is about. What I think Colin's suggesting, unless I've missed the point entirely, is the setting up of a separate senior officers appeals committee, which is populated simply for that purpose, so that there is no confusion in anyone's mind about what the role of the 15 members appointed to the appeals committee is on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, I will take that.
I'm seeing some nodding on that one, so that feels like that might reach a consensus view.
So, Chair, what I could do is take that away and just come back to the Constitution Committee with an update in that respect to ensure that we're aligned with the JNC guidance.
Yeah, I think it's a tidying up exercise, Gillian. I think the problem is the Appeals Committee probably meant something different when it was originally set up in the Constitution. Yeah. And now it actually serves only one or two main purposes, which are quite specialised. So I think going away and tidying that would be quite useful. Phil, did you want to come in as well?
Well, I did actually, but it was broadly the point that Colin made. But as part of that tidying up that you suggest, Mark, my problem with this paragraph is the use of the word subcommittee, because that implies that it's a subset of the appeals committee, and what you're proposing is that it isn't, that it's a specific new committee of senior members. And I think that subcommittee reference makes it confusing, certainly confused me.
I will take that away. Thank you very much. I'll take that away, Chair, and come back to you.
Brilliant. Okay. Is everyone content with it to come back? And that we've given a steer that's got support from around the table? Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much on that one. So moving on to agenda item, bear with me a second, number 5, monitoring officer changes to the Constitution. So Rob.
So the Constitution allows me to make certain changes under delegated powers. Both of these fall into that category. So the first is simply codifying the changes to cabinet portfolios that the leader put in place after the election, and that's Annex A of my report. And the second reflects the fact that the provision that allowed meetings and decision making to take place remotely has now expired, and therefore we need to remove from the Constitution that remote meetings protocol. Of course, we will hold it in abeyance and hope that at some stage we can reinstate it, but for the time being, we'll be taking it out.
Any questions? So on the job roles, I think it's a bit spot the difference. If you do spot the differences, they are very subtle. But I'm sure we'll gladly fill you in on those ones. The second point, it's probably worth referencing, Rob, that the government is currently at consultation on the entire issue of remote meetings more generally. So I don't know whether individual groups have inputted into that process. I'm not sure what the deadline for the consultation is. I can't remember. I remember seeing it last week.
It's this week, Mark.
Is it this week? So individual groups may wish to input into that one. I know at the LGA there's a strong sense of that there should be flexibility allowed to utilise some of these tools. I had Paul, I got a hand up, but Colin waved first, so I'm going to let Colin in first and then Paul.
It was just a question really about joint committees, which seem to be covered in that they, I think they do need to meet in person. But I just wanted to clarify the position of pensions, because, and I just wanted to know why that was outside, because that's still meeting virtually this week. And I just wondered why that wasn't included when some of the other joint committees, as it were.
Good question, Rob.
So the risk in terms of continuing to meet virtually is that decisions could be challenged. So if a meeting is deemed to have not been a legal meeting, then obviously any decision that meeting makes could be challenged as null and void. So what we're doing is reviewing the agendas of committees as they come up. And if there are no formal decisions to be taken on the agenda, then essentially that risk doesn't exist. And so we are able to carry on virtually. This meeting would be an example of that. We're just taking that as a pragmatic decision because obviously, given the size of our county, the fact, certainly in the case of this meeting, perhaps not in the case of Pensions Committee, the meetings are often quite short. If we can avoid the need for people to travel extensively for a half-hour meeting, then clearly there's a benefit in doing that. So it's just a pragmatic solution at the moment while we wait and see what the long term holds.
Cool. Next is Paul, then I've got John, and then Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. It was really just this about a process. Really, I didn't realise we could input into this the point about remote meetings. I didn't know there was a sort of a full-blown consultation going on actually. So what's Simon might be able to answer this better. I mean, what is the process for doing that, Simon? It sounds as we've only got a few days.
Paul, you can make a response back to the government department. What I'll do following this meeting is I'll circulate around group leaders the paper that went out from the government seeking views. All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I got it through the LGA group office, so I'm not sure that was how it was distributed to me. I can't remember what I said now. Is it John then Jeremy? John.
Okay, thank you. As with the previous item, I think while we're only noting it, the update on cabinet portfolios, it would be helpful if there was a track change version of this, so we could see clearly what has been moved and whether anything's been deleted and where's it gone to. I picked up a couple of things, so I just wanted some assurance that there isn't any diminution in the focus we're going to have on children's services, and that there isn't any compromise being made with regard to moving public and community transport out of environment, if I've read that correctly.
I think Rob can provide you with a track change on it. I mean, there was no secret agenda here. I think what we were simply doing was rejigging the portfolios to reflect how they'd operated since they were changed last time, and some items just were under the wrong heading, to be brutally honest, and had never ever really been operated in that way. So those are the changes on that one. I've got, Rob, are you able to provide that?
Yes, I can do that.
Excellent. Jeremy, then Andrew Miller. Jeremy, we can't hear you.
I didn't notice that. Yeah, I was just looking at the issue of returning to, or returning to meetings with us all around the table. One to do with how we're going to make sure that the meetings are COVID compliance, as it says in the report. I mean, in some ways, we need to make sure that when we are having meetings in the future, whether it's COVID or it's just the flu or whatever it is, that we need to make sure that the rooms are cleaner and fresher and less likely to cause infections amongst councillors than in the past, and officers as well who are attending. So I just wonder how we're going to review that to make sure we do that when we go back. The other one is, of course, when we do return to having meetings around the table, how we're going to make sure that they're recorded and they're webcast, particularly the committee meetings, because at the moment, we've been said that this is a meeting that we're not making any decisions, but it's the one that's being broadcast on the internet. So how are we going to make sure that we do that, particularly if we get to the situation where we can either have either or, that we make sure that there's some consistency in the way that the public can access these meetings, because I'm sure we've got lots of interesting things to talk about and they're quite interested in listening. Probably get half a dozen people at the most, and normally a journalist who doesn't want to come into Shire Hall. The other one is, if we're going to do something and continue with online meetings, even if they're just one for general discussions, and can we do something about WebEx? It really is the most clunky, miserable. The quality of the sound from individuals is bad, and I don't get the same from Microsoft Teams, and I don't get the same from Zoom. So why is it that this system the county council is using is so poor? What's the problem? Surely our ICT should sort it out.
I think we've got the general gist there, Jeremy, but you're breaking up slightly. So
well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. What's the problem with it?
I think there's probably a need to have a separate briefing on IT stuff going forward. Simon will probably just give us a very brief flavour of that, but it's all in the plan. It's a short answer.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, both the council chamber and the cabinet suite are having new windows at the moment. So you'll see that they'll be much improved. So all members will see that. In terms of webcasting meetings, we will be able to do that from the autumn. I'm hoping that will be September. And the kind of facility that we will have will allow hybrid meetings as well. So if the government changes the current arrangements to allow virtual meetings, they'll probably allow hybrid meetings as well. So some people in the room, some people at home. If that happens, we will have that capability. And even if they don't, meetings that are not formal council meetings could be held in that way. So we'll have a really good facility that will be available both in the Cabinet Suite and the Council Chamber. In terms of WebEx, we can't use Teams at the moment because we don't have Office 365. We will have Office 365 by the end of the year. So then we can consider whether we need to change to that. One of the, I accept what you're saying about WebEx, Jeremy, but one of the things with WebEx that is better than some of the other platforms is it allows more people to be on the screen. So it's not all bad with it, but I do accept there are some issues.
The biggest problem, Simon, is sound quality. And it's every meeting, the sound quality is poor from individuals. It's not just that it breaks up, but even when there's no breakage, the sound quality is not that good. And you don't.
We have strayed somewhat off the agenda item.
I know we have. Well, that's my job to test your championship.
I've given you a little bit of leeway there, Jeremy, but I got a couple of other members wishing to come in, so I'm going to go over to Andrew Miller and then Phil Robinson.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to actually ask John Bloxham a question. You referred to being concerned about dilution of scrutiny around children's services. So, as the chair of CFOC, I'd be interested to know exactly what you mean. If you want to talk to me offline later, that's fine. I was just a bit curious about what lay behind that remark. Secondly, I think if we're doing I think it's great to have a review of online services. One of the things that I think needs to be a factor, a specific remit of that role, is to look at how accessible the county council meetings are for those who are still have full-time jobs, as for example I do. Am I right in thinking out of the members I'm the only one with a full-time job here? I think so.
I work full-time, Andrew, but I have to shift my hours around to suit this as well.
Yeah, but you run your own business, don't you, Lyndon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And
the reason for bringing that up is clearly, I mean, in order to come to perhaps even a 1 or 1.5 hour meeting, I have to effectively take the afternoon off work, which I don't get paid for. So it's that much more of a kind of a sacrifice in order to do that, which I'm happy to do. But I think if things were arranged in a slightly more friendly way, as far as timings of meetings go, it could help those who are still in full-time employment and not running their own businesses, as Lyndon is, to participate more fully in the life of the council. So just something I'd like to be part of the remit of the review. That's all. Thanks.
Well, okay. My leeway has probably been stretched to breaking point now because that's clearly not on the agenda. But officers will duly note that in the back of their minds. I'm sure it's for the most appropriate point to look at that. Phil,
I'd like to point out an inaccuracy in the portfolios, or one of them, namely my own. Second item, superfast broadband. The broadband project is separated into two components: the superfast broadband and the full fibre. And our emphasis now is full fibre, so perhaps this is the opportunity just to have that section changed so it's full fibre broadband rather than superfast broadband, because superfast broadband is only up to 30 megabits per second, and actually our agenda is to get everybody up to 70 megabits per second minimum, which is full fibre broadband.
Fair point. The language has probably been in there for about 10 years, so happy for that change to be made. Anyone else got any questions or comments on this one? Rob, I think this is just for noting, isn't it? Excellent. Okay, so there's no more noting of anything in particular. Thank you very much for that. That was a useful debate. And I think the issue on the IT thing will be at some point, I think there'll be a proposition that will probably go to group leaders around what the IT offer will enable us to do on meetings. And then I think there's probably a conversation to be had depending on what the outcome of the government's consultation, its current legislative piece of work. There will be, I think, through group leaders, a conversation about where we want to take it as an authority. And I'm sure group leaders would link back into their respective groups then to get a bit of a guide on that one. I mean, my sense is the government wants to take advantage of remote meetings as an option, but you can also imagine it's not universally popular among councillors. So it's finding the right balance. Cool. Okay, unless there's anything else, of which there is no agenda item for any other business, thank you all for attending, and hope to see you all next time.